you're on wine scholarship.
Did you have any no-shows?
We might have had one or two, but
So you're gonna break even?
I'm gonna break even. I was happy to see Norman Polio, not just because I was happy to see Norman Polio, but because I don't think I had her down in the town, so.
Oh, good, she offset.
She offset my.
To comment about the wall situation, the border in Texas, the border between the United States and Mexico is the river. And I'm astonished by people having no imagination to be able to realize that you can't build a wall in a river or on either side without causing all kinds of problems. This is where he wants the most spectacular wall to be. I'm thinking this would just simply be an extravagant symbol of nonsense. And also a problem, many people pointed out, migration of animals, ecological problems. Just actually, it would have to be on the American side, and they'd be eminent domain property owned by Americans.
Yeah, they're taking the land from. Yeah, there's a church.
And all people own land. And they need access to the river and all sorts of things. So I suspect that some of the local Texans are not happy.
They are, and there's a church that's isolated in that area, and they're gonna have to take it down or something.
Yeah.
Well, the church is just getting sanctuary, so we have to take it down anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but it's mind-boggling because you can do this.
Yeah.
Well, they don't pay it, just
I guess.
It's tough.
We're in the library here at Amherst is named for Robert Frost, which is African, because something there is.
That doesn't have a wall. Good fences.
Oh, yeah.
So do we have some photos coming up, or should we go on?
No, I think we're ready to. I thought that given our agenda and our time,
Okay.
we can devote, especially when we talk about the website tomorrow, we can focus on the Allgaier photo archive and blend it in with the larger one. The archive that we would show through slideshows, every item on there, with the exceptions of recent contributions, some of which we just seen, are on the website. And we'll talk about how you can find them there tomorrow.
Thank you. So, Katie, did you want to make a couple of remarks about
Well,
Becky, please?
just Becky, who was in, now it just flew out of my head. Asunción?
No.
Who just, San Mateo.
San Mateo,
San Mateo,
Textile, yeah.
I got an email from Joyce Walworth, who heard about it from Bolger, maybe? That Becky had passed away, and she just wanted to share ideas about how special Becky was. And so Joyce and Becky, both, neither one here tonight, but their thoughts are going back and forth. And there are so many links. Becky was somebody who spent all her time devoted to her values. She never had a detour. After our summer in Mexico, she loved it so much she looked for a job teaching English in Mexico. She was up in Sonora, and she was able to go back to the village and visit a couple times during the harvest season. And that's why some of her pictures show the harvest taking place. Then she went and got her master's in London and worked for Amnesty International. And interestingly enough, where's Kevin? You just mentioned the visiting the Plaza de las Culturas. Her first assignment at Amnesty in 69, 70 was defending some of the students who'd been not murdered, but imprisoned after the demonstration there. So all the way from London back to Mexico, defending the Mexican protesters. And then she went on, married a Spaniard, and ended up back in Illinois doing two prongs. One was Head Start, and a lot of her clients were Hispanic, so she used her language there, and she did interviews to see you know, when the kids were being on intake. And then the other was conservation. Her family owned a property with an easement, a conservation easement. And believe it or not only did they reclaim it for native plants, et cetera, they raised monarchs. We know where those monarchs were going to end up. It was pretty wonderful all around. So, yeah. But they actually, you know, protected the little chrysalises and launched them off back to Mexico.
To us and humans.
Did anybody here know Professor Brown?
Lincoln Brower, I was thinking the same thing. We knew him well, and he was the monarch of monarchs. Yeah. And, you know, the annual migration.
He was the one who figured out where they wintered in
Yes,
Mexico.
he was the great monarchist. Amherst College, he was
He was a
right
professor
here.
of biology.
Biology, right here.
What was his name again?
Lincoln Brower.
B-R-O-W-E-R.
Yeah.
Yeah,
P-R-O-W.
Lincolnshire, yeah.
B-R-O.
Oh, Brown.
We're not sure.
Lincoln Brown.
Lincoln Brower, you know, we don't remember how he spells it, but Amherst College, very eminent scholar and wonderful person. And
And a friend of monarch butterflies.
yes, and that's why when they started disappearing, it was really a very scary thing. Did he write about that? I'm trying to think. Don't recall. Yeah, I think he did.
I don't
But we
know.
talked to about, I mean, everything was flourishing in 1976 to 79 when we lived close to him. And
His last name is spelled B-R-O-W-E-R.
Oh, Brower. Marvelous. I would-
The web knows.
Yes.
Mr. Google.
But it's funny, we both crossed Brower at the same time.
The web remembers.
But it's again like the strange connection that Amherst had.
Oh, yes, Cross, Brower. Everybody.
Did you mention where they
And
gathered in
Keokuk,
Mexico?
You know.
Very near Tabasco.
Did you mention that?
Did I mention it now?
Yes,
At
here.
some point I mentioned it.
Okay, I just wanted to make,
Somebody this evening said that, Woody,
Woody.
did you say,
Peggy.
there you go, that your town was close to the.
Right on the edge of the reserve, yes. And we were asked several decades ago when we were there, did you come to see the monarch butterflies? And we said, huh? Don't know anything about them.
But this monarch tourism sounds wonderful. I vote for it. I would go.
And I think Calix had a lovely little temple of the wind in their
Oh,
backyard.
it did.
Up on the hill, yes.
Yeah, and people used to come traveling in tandem, all these little, sleeping cars and stuff like that. And people from the United States used to come down to visit the ruin.
And you guys just had your picnic sitting up on that.
Well, actually, we took money from the tourists. We charged them. We did. We sold oranges to the tourists, and we also charged them for the fees. Well, we did. We did. There was a church there, up near the ruins where they had taken, some tourists had taken all the statues out of these sort of glass boxes where the statues had been, and they had stolen the statues. So we were charging them a surcharge for, to replace those statues. And then we were selling the orange juice also for that purpose.
And were you passing this commerce on to the village? Was it
Of course,
to help
yes,
them
we were
to-
all in cahoots. There was no, there was no regulation that they had to pay. We told them they had to pay. There were these long caravans.
I mean, then the villagers could continue this FUS, so you helped.
I don't know that they would have had the guts to do that. It was probably pretty illegal. But we could just be, we didn't understand that we couldn't do this to replace the statues and blah, blah, blah.
Thank you, Katie. So to a sort of summary, I'd appreciate people's reflections on what you sort of understand as next steps, but if you'd frame that within what, again, what your sense of what if someone said, what were the Amigos values? What are the Amigex values? How would you frame that? And we'll sort of let people, participate as you wish, and when we get close to 8, we'll see where we are. So it can be a longer reflection or a very brief one about what you heard today as a next step, and how you would frame a values question.
I think it's a statement of human possibility. But it reduces to that. You believe in human possibility. There's a sense of faith in that.
Thank you.
I think that we knew there was a bigger world than the one in which we lived. And therefore, we're interested in exploring that.
Yes.
I think we really value community, people supporting each other, caring about each other, looking beyond their own agendas to a shared vision of what we want to create.
I think we value diversity in our community. It's different ethnic groups, different nationalities.
I think just a broader view of our neighbors.
Yes. Other thoughts about that? Father, the priest from Putuculco, one of our, on the website is his Spanish and a translation of his reflection on the value of dialogue, which is, maybe worth your looking up at some point, because it's quite moving.
What was his name?
Luciano Villanueva.
Luciano Villanueva.
It was very impressive, especially in the face of the English.
Yes.
And it was comforting to read that piece. That was included in the newsletter.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't complete.
That's right, it ended.
Yeah, it ended abruptly. I guess we didn't have the other page.
I believe that this summer, the greatest benefit for the Americans and the Mexicans is dialogue. Together we have encountered problems, that we have exchanged ideas, and together we've solved them, and then it's addressed them, and then it's truncated.
I'd say an inherent value was belief in intercultural exchange. Us learning from them learning from us.
You know, Thomas Burton had a moment when he was on a street in Lexington, Kentucky, where he sensed his total interconnectedness with all other beings that were walking on that street, and therefore extending on to all beings in the world. I think we had some innate sense of that, either before we left or after we came back, of that sense of interconnectedness. Anyway.
Yes, please.
And you could say as a value, we respect and appreciate all cultures.
I would just add to that from my house in New Hampshire, I can leave there and get on 91. The first stoplight I will see will be the Canadian border. And in recent years, I've made a number of trips up to Montreal, Quebec. And again, it's the beauty of the French culture that you find there. And my high school French, I pull that out. And again, it's just like in Mexico. They appreciate that you speak Spanish in Mexico. When you're in French-speaking Canada, they appreciate that you can speak some French up there. And it's the beauty of that culture. It's fun going up there. It's a nearer.
And then with that sort of collection of notes about values, does anyone want to offer their own synopsis of where they think we are in terms of our next steps as a group. Yes, please, Kevin.
You know, one thing I heard, sort of with slightly different opinions about where to go next, but I think everybody liked the idea of a communication network, number one, and a sort of clearinghouse, the way we put it, different ideas, different projects, different organizations that we can promote to each other through the communication network that we set up. You know, which is kind of remarkable in and of itself, that we even have that communication network after almost 50 years. You know, so that in itself is a testament to something of our experience and our values. And I think that, if nothing else, that's a very important outcome of our union here.
And the fact that it exists releases us from the obligation to come up with a signed document by the time we leave tomorrow. So the dialogue is ongoing. Yeah. Although we certainly want to make as much progress as we can. Yeah.
Any remarks from spouses, partners, significant others, observers who are either bored to tears or bowled over by this side of their screen? Or none of the above.
Mark Peterson's wife, Indira. I met Mark at Amherst College. We were both teaching here back in 1976. He had already, you know, he had of course been a student at Amherst College. Then he came back to teach there, and that's when I came after graduate school and met him. And ever since then, I've been hearing about Amherst Amigos and that time in Mexico. There's not, that's now 43, 44 years. There's not a day, not a year that goes by without his talking about that as such a significant part of his experience. And I can just say that I'm so glad that all of you have come together and that it's going further, and especially because I was an exchange student myself. I came as an American field service student to this country, and one of the greatest things for me wasn't simply living with an American family, but AFS made sure that you met people who came from all the other countries. I had so many friends from Latin America, from Mexico, from Argentina, from Europe, from everywhere, and I became a global person at that time. And of course it was also 1967, 68. So I became everything I am today. And it's wonderful to see that that spirit, which is so important, that you have all carried that with you, and that somehow this Mexico, these amigos was such an important part of that. So that's why I think it's wonderful that you all who carry this flame will carry it forward, and that I can be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Does anybody know, if anything, whatever happened to an organization called Operations Crossroads Africa?
I knew that organization. I have a
It was.
person who ran it. Do you remember also?
I don't remember.
I met him once. He's wonderful.
One of the big fundraisers for that organization was Ruth Plimpton.
Calvin Plimpton?
Calvin Plimpton's wife.
He was president.
She gave a lot, she would do talks all over the Northeast, raising money for Crossroads Africa, which at that point in time sent college students to work projects in Africa.
Absolutely. I think when I lived in Cambridge, I knew it.
Still exists.
It still does exist?
I lost touch with it.
I have friends who
Okay.
do something that will change your life.
So other comments about people's sense of where we arrived and what's next? And I think we can all look through our notes and we have things recorded, but certainly the 6 of us on the planning committee can follow through. Other kind of sense people would have. I'd like to make sure we cover it. Or do.
Maybe something to think about overnight.
Yeah, well, I have one question. If we, forgetting the time, but let's say if it were an ideal time, how many of us would be interested in meeting up in Tucson for a Keno border initiative, 4-day weekend. Did anybody imagine that as something we'd like to do?
That's amazing.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, a nice group. 8, 9.
Again, at dinner, talking with some people, I raised the question, would Keno rather have my check or me? I mean.
I think they think.
Yeah, I was afraid that
If
was
you
gonna.
come, you'll write a bigger check. Because it didn't sound like, when you went, Peter and Marcia, that you were doing work while you were there. This was not a week-long cook and serve experience.
No, I mean, it was a combination of helping out at the Commodore, feeding people,
You
talking
did that
to
day,
the people,
yeah.
and then being exposed to the other aspects of the migration.
And spreading the word.
Yeah, but then, I mean, there was no heavy, people's contribution at all. I mean, they didn't push that.
Yeah.
I mean, they liked it, but yes.
So I just raised a question because traveling from the Northeast becomes a little more expensive.
It's a little, I know, do we go to our friend's granddaughter's wedding in Hawaii, or do we ride on a slightly larger gift? We go.
But not in the summer.
And maybe we go to the wedding. Any other thoughts before we return to conviviality?
Can I just say, I think that when I'm thinking back to maybe like 2 years ago, but also these few phone conversations we've had and for the committee. And I remember thinking, okay, I don't know. This is sort of, I don't know, where are we going? And what the thing that strikes me the most about today is we just spoke and talked to each other, and there was so much commonality in ideas that it brought it a little more down to earth. I don't like that, but you know what I mean. And I think showed maybe more cohesion than I thought there might be on those phone calls, where I'm sitting there going, oh my God, I don't know. I didn't say that.
You didn't let on at all.
I know.
No.
You kept driving us forward.
Yeah.
You wouldn't let us quit. Thank you. Okay, well, tomorrow there will be.
Can I?
Oh, yes, please,
You know what, I
Roger,
feel
please.
frustrated because I feel like there's a lot of these 60s idealism in this room. And there is a consensus and certainly the general understanding, but I feel like the number of ideas tossed out are not planned. And we have so much brain power in this room. And I would prefer some sort of space capsule view of immigration. I mean, we've got attorneys and historians and so forth, but some broader picture of the issues we're trying to address and how we can, in a micro area or a macro area, try to come at them legally, socially, economically, and something. Maybe I'm just trying to put too much here, but I'm really interested more in the concrete plan of what we're going to accomplish and how, not just this group, but how, and there's some sort of longevity, some sort of legs to what we're up to. And the communication thing is wonderful. And I'd love to know more about each person's background and skills and so forth. And also how we promote a dialogue, because it sounds too much like a monologue. Anyway, that's just.
So what dialogue between?
I would love to see the Amigos Project, the website, involve people from Mexico, from our villages, having some sort of input and dialogue with what we're communicating.
Well, that's precisely where we're weak, because so few of us have maintained any contacts with our friends in the villages.
But that doesn't mean we can't try.
Do we have computers?
I-
Yes.
I-
Well, I'll put it this way. I know people that live in L'Ascension have computers. The village has, the town has a municipal website and a website from the Carruthers. They're very hooked into the internet. What about you? Who knows?
Well, those may be some questions about
The two
villages.
places on Facebook. So
Oh, somebody's got a picture.
They're all on Twitter.
Every town has a website which is enormous and even includes those little manzanas, the little outlying hamlets. It's amazing. You'll see pictures of all the current festivals and it's huge.
Messages to the
Yeah, you could contact people off their website. Just send an email, say to somebody, is anybody studying English? Does anybody want to start an exchange, an email exchange with some people who are interested in practicing English? I don't know.
There's they could start with a letter to Hickey saying we had this meeting and, you know, we talked about what a wonderful experience it was and how grateful we are to them. You know, it's a start.
If the towns have computers in the schools, we could set up pen pal assistance with the students.
But then you don't know who you're speaking to. If you're speaking to the big crook of the town or the wonderful nurse or teacher, that's the.
Well, some of this could be the hook for, I mean, some of this would be the legwork for that happened before a trip, that this helps us determine where we go and who we ask to see when we get there as a possibility. But Roger, you having raised it, do you have a sense of how, from today's discussion, how we would proceed in that way?
You know what, I do my best thinking when I put it on paper.
Yeah.
Just like James Reston. And so off the top of my head, no, I
That's
don't
okay.
have it.
Thank you.
It's all, and
You're going to be thinking about it.
We can address the mayor of each town, just see what comes back. I don't know what you can say.
But I'm not as
But-
skeptical about dealing with people over the internet, because I'm horrified having organized the 50th high school reunion. You can find out more than you want to know. So doesn't matter where they live in the world. They've got
us.
They find you.
So at one point, I think it was 2 years ago, I'll pretend like I'm remembering this correctly, someone suggested that we have someone volunteer. We had 6 villages to be the point person for communication with that village or pursuing communication with that village. And we should be able to do that. San Mateo is not represented here, but John Steinhardt and Peter Williams are still in communication. To a lesser extent, Roseanne McCarthy Leibitz. And then here we have the other 5. Is that a way to try to, by the time we leave tomorrow, have a sort of designated person who will help us figure out how to reach someone in those towns?
I do think you need to think about what might happen and what's the purpose of this. If the purpose is to ask them the question, what questions are there? If the purpose is just to establish communication, then we need to be prepared. We could get anything back, everything from, oh, I'd love to talk to you, to, do you know how I can get into the nearest college, to whoever else. So you open that door, you need to be prepared for whatever comes in the door. I'm not necessarily against it, but I think we're a little Pollyannish about saying we put out the word and everybody responds in the way we intend.
Yeah, we won't know. Good caution.
So I think another way is, what are the next steps after you leave here? And it may entail more communication and more research. I think inevitably it does. How do you restrict it? Is there any particular direction that you would eliminate from these conversations is there a way of narrowing it down? I sympathize with Roger's, won't call it impatience, but his sense of urgency in defining a plan of action. I think that we generated, and I could not list all of the ideas that came forth this afternoon. I don't have X-ray vision, so I can't see the other side of the whiteboard that we covered. And I would think, wow, also we've been at it all day. So I don't know how much further demands I would make at this particular point in time. So that says maybe a comma wouldn't be such a bad idea. But before you put that comma in, try to get a general sense of what the next direction might be. And I'm very much hoping, as I will talk about tomorrow, I hope several of you will be able to join, because I think first of all, I'm learning that the archival part of our website has not yet been fully explored. People really don't know the treasures that are hidden in there, and then gives you a much broader, not as bad as the 50th high school reunion. So I think everything in there is a cause for rejoicing, if I might say so. But there is a channel that's been opened, talked about clearinghouse for information. We need to drive it. So I think the fact that you were driven by some force to assemble here today and tomorrow is, I think, a firm indicator that we can find the energy to move forward and continue to interact and create the dialogue we need, the multi-log.
Well said.
We're meeting at 8?
No, food will be here at 8, but we won't start our official conversation till 9. So you just want to eat and talk about the video, don't show up till 9, or the website, but food should be here around 8. And, so yeah, sleep on it. And as part of the should we go to Mexico or how do we go to Mexico discussion, some of this can come back in.
Yeah.
And Thank you for iron.
And Greg, Game of Thrones starts. Just kidding.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, all of you who are listening in, good night. No one called in. This took